going to call the meeting back into order. We're going to bump up item number 57. I put this on our agenda. We did meet an executive session for that, but I wanted to invite Senator Borrelli. I see that you're in attendance today. If you'd like to approach the podium and basically tell us about your letter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and supervisors. Thanks for this opportunity. I know that letter came out and it seemed pretty heavy-handed, but that wasn't the intent. The intent was to alert everybody to a Senate concurrent resolution that was passed by the majority of the state legislature. For the audience, just for the education, I'm the Senate Majority Leader. I'm your senator for District 30, Legislative District 30. So we passed this out of the Senate and the House concurring. I'm sure you all have read the resolution. It kind of gives a very good timeline of historical fact on the reason why we're alerting these people, alerting to everybody to these details. A lot of people don't understand this because the mainstream media will spin things out of control and not tell the truth and pretty much give mostly misinformation. But back in 2017, the Department of Homeland Security had said that elections are part of critical infrastructure. Right, it has a national security element to that. And of course, in 2018 and 2019, there were Senate hearings where even Senator Harris had said that when they got briefed and they had a display of how electronic voting systems can be hacked, she even said, this is a no-brainer, we should go back to paper ballots, hand counts. Now, I find it ironic that the governor had vetoed a bill that I did to address this issue, which is kind of ironic because it's about cybersecurity. And what I'm saying is we should have the same standards for our weapon systems. When they found a microchip that was made in the People's Republic of China in an F-35, they grounded all the aircraft until they replaced that part. Simple as this. Government equipment has been hacked. There's been cybersecurity breaches in DOD. This is no surprise. There's plenty of source material out there. There was a study that was commissioned by actually the Democrat caucus that Dr. Halderman, who actually did an examination of the Dominion machines and ES&S and a bunch of others. And they had determined that there's so much vulnerabilities in there. However, the findings were actually sealed by a federal court. We don't know if these things got fixed. In Williamson County, Tennessee, there was an election there where they did a forensic examination of the equipment, and they had found the EAC, Election Assistance Commission, actually found erroneous code on these machines. And of course, even the CISA recognized that and confirmed that there was erroneous code on the machines that caused the tabulation to have misfeeds and misreads and so on and so forth. But the manufacturer said, but we fixed it. Well, here's the problem. When they say they fixed it, we want to make sure. Here is the big issue. There is no oversight whatsoever. Not from the Board of Supervisors, not even our county recorder, or even our elections director. And let me tell you something. This is not an indictment on Mohave County, on our elections. When I sent this letter out, I'm saying this is everybody in this entire state, because this is a national security issue. If we cannot have free and fair elections, we are in trouble. If these machines are vulnerable to hacking, and even a wireless, which these machines that we do use here, even in this county, do have a wireless capability, we want to make sure that nobody's updating things remotely. When I talk about oversight, I'm going to prove it like this. Let's look at Cochise County. Cochise County Board of Supervisors want to do 100% hand count of all their precincts. Secretary of State's office stepped up there and interfered and tried to intimidate them to stop them from doing that. When the Board of Supervisors proceeded to go forward and do that hand count, remarkably, Mark Elias, Democrat lawyer, he's their big six-gun guy, he sues Little Ococheese County. Now, why would Mark Elias care about Little Ococheese County? Because the statute states that if a county is going to do 100% hand count of all their precincts, the Secretary of State shall, and I'm paraphrasing, shall provide the source codes to a special master that shall be appointed by the court, and those findings shall be made public to the court and to the Secretary of State. Now, they tied them up in court long enough to run the clock out to the date that they actually had to certify and canvass the elections. You all remember that date because you were threatened with a felony if you didn't certify that on that deadline. There is no oversight. We have a private third-party vendor that has complete autonomy and immunity because you need those source codes to make sure that the equipment is operating properly. The citizens are entitled to that. They're paying for it with their tax dollars. There's no oversight whatsoever. You're constantly being blocked. When the Senate did their audit, we tried to get the source codes from the Secretary of State. She refused. We subpoenaed Dominion. They refused. Well, because they're a private company and we don't have any jurisdiction over them. So, well, and here's something else that's kind of ironic. The governor's vetoing all kinds of cybersecurity legislation, but yet she does an executive order 2023-10 on April 4th, banning TikTok on government equipment. Why? Because data can be mined and taken from government computers and phones. All we're saying is the SCR says it needs to have DoD standards, but here's the other bigger point. There's nothing in statute that mandates electronic voting systems being used as a primary source. There's nothing in statute that says you have to do this. But the media and other supervisors in other counties want to lead people on to believe that myth. It's not a mandate. You don't have to use the equipment. You can do a 100% hand count of all your precincts, 100% hand count of all your ballots, and it can be done at the precinct level. It doesn't take a lot of people. It might take, with every item that's on the ballot, maybe 17 different items on a ballot, it could take about 85 people. 5 people per item. For example, if it's a presidential race, you have 3 counters, 2 observers, and you take that ballot and move it on down the assembly line. We're not talking on one day, because you can tabulate votes all through the election, period. All through the election, you can literally tabulate. So I'm pretty sure I can find at least 100 volunteers that would actually step up and do this. What I'm asking Mohave County to do, and I know there's some debate on, does the legislature have its plenary authority under the Constitution to do this? That's a good debate. I believe we do. But here's the thing. We shouldn't even have to have that argument. We should be leading by example because we are disenfranchised by the big counties, Maricopa County, and even Pima County. We're being disenfranchised. Piece of legislation that went through this year to actually get rid of the ERIC system. Well, the governor vetoed it. Now we're going to sue because it's illegal. These are the things that's been going on in Phoenix, we're all being disenfranchised. And, you know, if we need other reasons, I mean, even the S.C.R. says things need to be made in United States or trusted sources. Even Joe Biden said in his Build Back Better plan, just remember these 2 words, made in America. But let's also go back down to, you're going to hear the other arguments, the opposing arguments. Oh, it's going to cost too much. I'm sure we can get the volunteers to do the hand counts and do all the legwork on this, all the manual labor. But what costs? That cost has already been paid for. That's been paid for by the blood and treasure of Americans that have gone before me. And you know what? Tomorrow is the 79th anniversary of D-Day. 79 years ago, 18-year-olds youngest is 18 years old, some even 16 because they lied about their age, join the service to defend this country and fight in Europe and in the South Pacific. We should not squander that blood and treasure. And I ask for your support to move this on your agenda to comply with a hand count paper ballot. I'm open for questions.
Supervisor Angus.
Thank you, Senator Borrelli. I see that Senator Wendy Rogers is here as well. And so I want to thank both of you on your sort of never-ending work on this issue. We know how important it is to you, and it's important to the state, and it's important to us as well. I have some questions. Maybe is Alan Tempert here? Okay.
He's got a great tie on.
Yeah, he's got to go there.
Try to keep that spirit going, huh? The Thai spirit.
Senator Borrelli talked about that you can count all during the voting process. And I don't think that's something that we've talked about. How would you see that working?
Well, Senator Borrelli is correct on that. We're allowed to start processing and counting ballots right after early voting starts, which happens to be 27 days prior to the election. Theoretically speaking, early voting happens, people start, ballots run into our office. It doesn't happen that quickly, but you could start, we'll say 27 days out. How could I see that happening? I really don't. There are other reasons I'm not. Ballots are received by the recorder's office. The recorder's office takes ballots that, at the beginning it's just all the early ballot phase. And Mohave County votes 75 to 80% early. 75. We're going to say 76, 77, 78, whatever. It's just under 80% is early ballots. So that means the biggest part of the vote count is already in the tally on election night, by far, because my goal is to always have every ballot that has reached my side of the wall from the recorder's office, which is mostly all of them that have made it to this building, in that count election night. So we need to deal with just election night ballots come election night. And we need to deal with the earlies, the late earlies, that are dropped off at the polling locations. In the last election, I think it was about 7,000 or 8,000, about 8,000 ballots were dropped off early at voting locations to go to the recorder's office to come back, and thus it takes a couple days to verify and get to me to count, okay? So how we could start counting, that first week's a wash. I think it happens on a Tuesday, happens on a Wednesday, and then by the time they would come in and get to me would be the next week. Okay, so I would literally have I'd have a little over 3 weeks to start processing ballots. I could do that Monday through Sunday or whatever. You know what I mean? It could be a continuous, because we do now. To be able to do it on the machines, to make it work. We're on the weekends doing it as well and what have you, right? Because the work dictates. The volume dictates the work and what happens down and in, right? So bottom line is we could have people, but I don't know how in the world I could get the first week coming in, a whole lot coming in. So I might be dealing with 15 to 20,000, 15,000 early ballots at that time. And then they start dropping off towards the end. Like toward the second week, you got the people that are real proactive and ready to fly, and then you got the ones that are kind of in the middle, and you got the procrastinators at the very end, and a whole boatload get dropped off, at the very last couple of days. And voter reg works over the whole weekend to get them to me, and I got people and staff and counting them and stuff. So there'd be a big group of them that wouldn't be counted to start with, because towards the end, because of the procrastinators in this world. You can start them out, but then I'm starting to think, how can I possibly do this? I mean, there's different theories. I've lived something similar to this. It takes five. But in theory, I think 7's a really good number, and I'm going to tell you why, okay? I'm going to tell you why. See, people are experimenting with 3 people. One calling, one watching, and one marking. That doesn't really work, because the caller might not be watching the marker, and the marker might not be watching whatever. You need to have, I've lived this one time, 21 years ago, okay? you need to make that it is legitimate, to make sure that the tally is correct. My biggest part in this whole thing is speed something. All right, that's all we've been hearing. And speed's very important. You know, who's winning, who's whatever. Accuracy. So let me tell you, people need, somebody has to have a ballot in front of them. They need a call. You need 2 people watching that call to make sure they make the right call. You got to make sure they're making the bubble for the right guy and not the other bubble, or there's like a little mark or whatever. You need a Republican and a Democrat. Say no different. Be watching. That's 3 people. You need people on a tally sheet, 2 sets of tally sheets. Somebody who makes sure they mark down the right names as they're going through. They then, after every 5, they need to say the word like score or tally to make sure that they're not off. You need people watching those people to make sure they're doing the right tallies. It takes 7 people to do a ballot correctly. It's a lot of people. That's what I'm really overkill in the situation. But if we need the integrity, if we need to have people say that this whole thing is going to be working right and those right tallies are going down, you need that many people. May I tell a little story that I experienced 20 years ago? Yes or no?
It's a brief one, right?
Yeah, okay.
I know you, Alan.
Thank you. I had to recount a race in Pennsylvania with about 65,000 ballots. One race, commissioner's race. It took 2 months to do it. It took 2 months to do it, and I had 10 people working on that. I delayed my coming back to Mohave County for 2 months. I got offered this job and said, I will not leave until I do this and get it done. And Mr. Walker said, fine, and I'm so glad that he did. It's a tough road to hoe. I'm just telling you, I don't know how I can't get enough people to work the voting polls for me, let alone get enough volunteers to help me with other things. I can't get them. I have short polling places. And it's frustrating. Okay. I usually get about 400 to 450 people to work the voting precincts for me. You know, somewhere in that ballpark. That's my ideal. I'm down and around the mid 300s, and we got people that they're short. That's all I got to say.
Supervisor Angus.
You know, you use that example of your 65,000, but that was all at once. What Senator Borrelli is saying is that, you know, I think it's worth investigating. I think it's worth really thinking it out. And so maybe once and for all, we can let our citizens know who don't trust the elections, and, you know, I believe Mohave County does a great job. Your department does a great job. But I think, again, we need to do some kind of report of exactly what it would take, you know, because you're just thinking off the cuff, and that's not fair. It's not fair. Sure. But if we took some time, did some kind of report, you know, honestly, and, you know, that would be how much manpower you would need, how much money you would need, realistically, at least we can present it to the public and say, if this is what you want, this is what it's going to take. And so we'll know once and for all, like, where we stand. Because right now, it just looks like, you know, things are going to keep going as they're going, and nothing will ever change, and people will stop voting, and we want to make sure that doesn't happen.
We can do that. But you know what? You got to realize, I'm talking about one race. There was an average of 21 races on the general election ballot of 2020. You know, they all got to be done. They all got to be done correctly. I got it. You know, I don't know if we have, I could do sampling. In other words, I could take the test decks from the last 2 elections. I can bring in board of people that help me prepare them, as a matter of fact. I could have them tally them, okay, by hand with a group of people that, like, we feel that we the right number of people to do this, okay? We can see how long it would take, and then we could extrapolate at that particular moment how long it would take, how many people, and how long it would take, okay? We can do it. We have time to do some testing if that's what you all want to do, and we could kind of present down to that. But my biggest concern, and the biggest concern of Senator Borrelli, is accuracy. Is it doing it correctly? I'm on the other end of that. I don't know, maybe because I've had such good elections, maybe because I've gone all these years and I've never been off a penny, you know, on any of the testing I've ever done. You know, I even proved that when we were doing the you know, the recounts and stuff like that. So one thing we got to take into consideration too, I'm sure you have. Hammer-day race? Oh my God, we'd have to do it again by hand. We would have to do 105,000 ballots again, and it can't get done in just a couple of days.
Speaking to the mic there, please. Thank you.
Oh, I'm so sorry. You know, so that was just an example. You know, Ham-Day race, I'm saying, you know, pick that out. We had 2 races, right? We would have to do 105,000 sheets of paper. 85 this last election for us, 105 on the 2020. I'm using my example sub. So 85,000 pieces of paper would have to be done again. It took me 4 days to do that with machines, 2 high-speed readers, and about 8 to 10 people working 8 hours a day to do it, you know, for the 4 days. To recount ballots that have already been totally prepared, fixed, adjudicated, the whole bit. It was the perfect world, the perfect storm to do that. We're going to have many, many more recounts. The legislature changed the rules. I am in agreement with them, totally, you know, on the proportions of what you need to do a recount, you know. But I'm thinking about trying to do them all over again, you know, for a race or 2. It's that I don't know. You know, you gotta live it. So.
And I'm going to open it up to other discussion comments from the board. Any other comments or discussion from the board?
I have a question of
Supervisor Johnson.
Mr. Temper. Obviously, the people you're going to have to get to work are going to be hard to get those people, but you also have to have a Republican and a Democrat at each one. And in the past, I know we got 3 board members up here have been the head of the county party, and I know it was hard time just finding the one person to come and do it. Do you think you might have a problem getting? I don't know if there's that many Democrats in the county, but you know, enough Democrats and Republicans that had to be approved by the county party, correct?
Supervisor Johnson, Chairman Lingenfelder, yes, absolutely. We're going to have a problem finding. It's about a 2/3, 2 Republicans for every 1 Democrat. But if we were to do something like this, we would have to do the best that we can to make it 1-to-1. I am not supposed to. I'm required to balance the boards at the polling places. Equal number of Republicans, Democrats, and, you know, independents that kind of fill in, right? It ain't that way everywhere. Look at a couple of places in this county, you're going to see a whole area full of Republicans and just a Democrat or 2 because you can't get the people. We're going to have an awfully hard time to get a workforce that will do this and dedicate themselves to be able to do this and do it correctly. You know, but Supervisor Johnson, I'm sorry I went long and I said, yes, correct.
Any other discussion points from the board? We've got 2 other individuals that would like to speak on this item.
Mr. Chair, may I respond?
Go ahead, Senator Borrelli.
Yes, thank you. And Mr. Temper's right. It took them months to do that with 10 people, 80,000. But we're talking, you have a whole period to get these done. Now, here's the other important thing that you're kind of overlooking. Notice I said primary method. If you want to use the tabulator to run it through as to check it out, like you go to the bank, you throw $20 bills on the counter, the teller's counter, they count them out by hand, and then they put it through one of those little counting machines. So you want to run it through a tabulator, you can do that. That's your secondary. But the evidence, if there's a discrepancy, you go back to the paper, because that's the actual vote. That is the legal document of the ballot, of the vote. And one of the other things is accuracy is more important than speed. And we can get enough volunteers to get into your count room. Like I said, 5 people, you say 7, that's great, I like it, it's good. Well, I'm sure we'll get enough volunteers for that. But once again, the elections don't belong to us. They don't belong to us. They belong to them people. Standing right behind us. It's their election. They need to, and I agree, they need to step up and volunteer. They need to step up and volunteer. Buster joined the Army. I joined in the Marines. People, you all stepped up and volunteered to run for office. I'm sure a lot of them behind me will step up and volunteer also. Thank you.
I'd like to call up Mr. Wayne Hollins. Probably stay close, Alan, just in case.
Wayne Hollins, Golden Valley. I'm registered as an independent, mainly because I don't trust the politicians of any party as far as I could throw a rock at them. So who am I going to trust to count that vote and make sure my vote was counted accurately and correctly? I thought of this before Mr. Trump came along. Never even crossed my mind, and I probably didn't even have that same opinion of politicians. Since then, I don't trust them anywhere near my ballot. I don't trust the Democrats much more, but so who's going to count my vote unless you run it through that machine? The machine I trust more than the people. Here, 2 for you, 1 for me, 2 for you, 1 for me. You know, they can check that after if there's a problem with the machine, and then we're talking about the machine being made with American-made parts. Well, as politicians, why in the hell did we ever have them made by somebody else? Didn't they have politicians back then when we got computers and did that? And why don't we make the laws that protect the people? All the problems that was with the elections since 2016, most of them been BS for that matter. None of them been proved or what have you. And now I got to trust. You don't have my trust. I want my vote counted. I want it counted properly. All the problems that we had in Arizona, they should have been checking out those machines and making sure the paper was the right size and it counted the thing before we ever had a vote. Finding out afterwards is I don't even have a word for it. Ridiculous. Count the votes, count them accurately, count them the same year they're cast. If you do it by hand and it takes you months, come on. We all deserve an accurate count, proper count, and that's all I'm saying. I don't care who you vote for. Doesn't really matter as long as your vote is counted and we trust that it's counted. Without that trust and integrity, why the hell are we even voting? Why do we even have a constitution? We don't have trust and integrity, then I don't care what party you're in, you shouldn't be there. So let's not make it any more difficult than it already is. Just count the damn vote. Let everybody vote that should vote, as long as they're legal, and count their vote. Pretty simple to me. I don't understand what the damn problem is. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Chris Rodarte.
I'm Chris Rodarte, Mohave County taxpayer, and I'm not entirely opposed to this item. I hardly agree with hand counting ballots, and I'm not opposed to machines and equipment that are made in America with election oversight. I mean, this is absolutely a well-intentioned resolution, Senator Borrelli. And speaking for myself, I think voters are disgusted and disenfranchised enough to volunteer to physically count ballots. I'd be there. But my argument is, why are we wasting our time and resources discussing and debating bills regarding election machinery when we should be more concerned about the real election integrity? And in this regard, I'm a broken record. Perhaps my naivety is showing, and you're probably tired of hearing this, but I have a simple 6-point plan, and it's in-person voting, small neighborhood precincts, voter ID required, no more motor voters, paper ballots counted by hand in the precinct where cast, absentee ballots only for military, elderly, or the ill, requested by the voter in writing, one-day voting on election day only, none of this early voting. And this is my opinion. This is where I believe the state of Arizona, Mohave County should be expending our taxpayer efforts, not band-aiding a broken system with baling wire and duct tape. And why do we tiptoe around this issue? We're making end runs, taking baby steps. Let's just take the plunge and fix it. Abandon the current system of machines. I know that'd be radical and just really crazy, but let's just do something like this. Let's take a real stand. I mean, we need to make elections real again before our republic is lost. And thank you for listening to my 2 cents.
Thank you, ma'am. That was the last speaker. Additional comments or discussion from the board?
Senator Rogers looks like.
Oh, excuse me, Senator Rogers. Please come to the podium. Thank you for being here today.
Mr. Chair, Supervisors, I'm Senator Wendy Rogers from Flagstaff, and it was a pleasure to drive over here this morning. I actually represent 4 counties. Coconino, so I can send you some Democrats, no problem. Navajo, Gila, and Pinal. I don't know if you ladies and gentlemen realize, but in this room right now is a real historic opportunity. What Senate concurrent resolution did in Arizona was to have the state legislature reclaim our plenary power, plenary, absolute power as a state legislature per the U.S. Constitution to decide time, manner, and place of federal elections. Not state, federal. And I know all of you know this, but I'm reiterating it for the audience. We tried to pass a Senate bill, SB, which was vetoed, that would have reclaimed the power, as it were, of state elections. But the SCR didn't require the governor's input. And so it was passed by the Senate and the House and transmitted to not the governor, but the Secretary of State. But it's up to you counties to be able to implement that. I know they say the state legislature is the closest to the people, and we are close to the people, but you at the county are the implementers. You at the county run the elections. And you, as Mohave County, have a distinctly historical opportunity here to lead in Arizona. Because Arizona right now is the only state which has a state legislature that has passed a continuing resolution to reclaim its plenary authority to determine time, manner, and place per the U.S. Constitution of federal elections. So you, 5 supervisors, have this unique historic opportunity to implement this SCR. And I do a lot of national interviews and podcasts, and I get asked, can the 49 other states do it? And my answer is they need to. And I believe they will follow Arizona's example. But Arizona won't do it until the counties do it. And the counties won't do it until one heroic county starts doing it. And that's you. You have the chance to lead. And for someone to say it can't be done, I don't accept that. 250 years of blood and treasure. And the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marine, and Coast Guardsmen, they never said they couldn't do it. They did it. It's about the mission. And maybe that's why you see Borrelli and Rogers trumpeting this, because we both retired from the military. I'm a 5th generation military officer. Our son is a Marine, not Air Force. He thought it was too soft. Is the 6th generation. My husband is retired military. My dad, my grandpa, all the way back to the Civil War. They would be rolling over in their graves if they heard us say we can't do this. We have to do it. I sat here for 3 hours this morning hearing all manner of issues here in Mohave County. And you know what I was struck by? Everything I heard was as a result of the election in one way or another. And I sit as the chair of the Senate Elections Committee, so I have been privy to all of the data sets presented of how corrupt and mismanaged Maricopa County's election was. And Maricopa County has roughly 65% of the electorate in Arizona. And they have disenfranchised my 4 counties. And they have disenfranchised you. We need to take our state back. And if we can't split up Maricopa County into 4 counties like we tried to do with another bill that got vetoed, then we have to do it here with our rural counties. This may be likely our last chance. We are on the precipice. We are being invaded on the border. Our economy is crumbling. One of my sheriffs in Navajo County, a Democrat, Sheriff Klaus, tells me daily how he's inundated with fentanyl and illegal immigrants. And he's grappling with that every day. Every state now in America is a border state. And everybody in America, believe it or not, looks to Arizona because we're at ground zero. We're at the pointy tip of the sword. And guess what, Mohave County? You're at the pointy tip of the sword. So I charge you with what I think, in all humility, I will say, is your responsibility to lead as a county and to implement this SCR, which says that the machines are corruptible, they are accessible by nefarious nation-state actors adverse to the U.S. More and more information is coming out daily. And I ask you to lead, to implement this, whether it appears as a paper ballot for the federal election versus the machines for the state. Ideally, we would ask that you put the state and federal races on paper. Build it, and we will come. I will send you Democrats from Coconino County if you need them. I stand for questions.
Thank you. Questions for the senator? Questions for Senator Rogers? Senator, I have a couple of questions for you. I think the vote by mail thing was never meant to be that should be for people that just can't make it to the polls.
Agreed.
And then the voter ID, common sense. Voting, in my opinion, is a privilege of citizenship. And for that reason alone, you should have to show your ID if you want to vote. I know that the legislature has taken some actions with regard to some of these things, but what is the legislature doing right now as far as continuing to push on decreasing or eliminating as much as possible vote by mail, showing voter ID, these types of things? And if you're getting vetoed, what types of things can the legislature do? Because all of us at the county level, we're looking to you as well as our pointy end of the sword to escalate this stuff into the court system.
Mr. Chair, supervisors, great question. Every single election integrity bill that we have advanced through the legislature has been vetoed. Elections have consequences. We have a 1-vote majority, and despite that, we've been well-led, we've been cohesive, we've been united. In fact, I would argue that the state legislature has been the adult in the room in Arizona. But we've been, you know, had everything quashed by the governor's office. So and I get asked this a lot by my constituents, well, Rogers, what are you doing? I mean, everything's going to get vetoed. We still try. We still have hearings. We still get the data out into the public domain, as I said in our elections committee, which has done yeoman work. And so we get it through the Senate. We get it through the House. We send it up to the governor's office because that's what the voters sent us to the state legislature to do. But again, I hearken back to the fact that because there was so much corruption and so much fraud in the Maricopa County run elections, we now have that person in the governor's seat. And that's where we are. We continue to fight. Every day, we must fight. The day we stop fighting, we lose. They want you to stop. We will not stop.
I appreciate that. From my chair, it looks like the state legislature needs to rein in Maricopa County because I think a lot of the people, both in the audience and behind the dais here, think that there's some funny business that happened down in Maricopa County. And that's what you need to rein in. And how do you rein it in? You know, I think eliminating as much as you can the vote by mail, baloney, the voter ID stuff. And if the governor's office isn't going to work with you, then how do you find a strategy to escalate it into the court system? Mohave County, I don't think, is the problem. You know, we're one of the brightest red counties in a hopefully still red state. I've been a Republican since I was 18 years old, card carrying. And I love my party, I love the values, and the fact that we don't stand on shifting stand and go with trends that are just, these days, just insane. We stand for something, and we stand for the legacy that the people that went to war and shed blood and the Constitution, that's a part of who we are as conservative Republicans, and we take it very seriously. But I don't think Mohave County has ever had a problem. I mean, we have done a stellar job here in Mohave County under Allen over the past 21 years. Our elections have been solid. And I want to support you. This is just speaking for myself, but we just got done with a discussion that shows next year we're going to have an $18.8 million deficit. And I don't know exactly how much it would cost. You know, it's easy to get up and say we're going to find volunteers, and sure, you'll get some more volunteers. But really taking a hard look at what exactly it would take. As my colleague stated, how many personnel would it require? What's the time period that those personnel would be required? What's the cost? Because I don't think anybody here disputes that it would be a little bit more. I don't know how much more. Those are the types of things that I'm trying to weigh because I do think that you're right. I think I would agree with you that voting machines are just an instrument to carry out an election. And the real thing that we're trying to solve here, whether it be Arizona or some of the other states, is voter trust. And a lot of people don't trust those machines. And so that's the real question. How do we increase voter trust?
Well, Mr. Chairman, supervisors, you brought up two really interesting points. But for you, a trustworthy, straight up, well-oiled machine, well-run county. That's why I'm here today. Because you are that. Because you are a reliable county. Because the rest of the state conceivably, arguably, can look to you. Because you're reliable. So I'm here to charge you, humble Mohave County, to lead the way. And secondly, you asked, well, how can you get counties, Senator, state legislature, to do right if you can't get bills passed? There was the Senate concurrent resolution, which was this little known, nuanced part of the state constitution that gave us that opportunity. And it was Senator Borrelli's brainchild. And he would come to me month after month and I'd say, are we going to talk about this? And he'd say, we're going to wait. We're going to wait to talk about it because it's a subtlety. It's a nuanced way to get the will of the people through without requiring the imprimatur of the governor. And we did that. And so you have this construct of a Senate concurrent resolution, which is the old Arizonans of days of yore thought that up and put it into the state constitution. Little did they know that we would have this inflection point in history 100 years later, where that vehicle, that construct, that little nuanced part of the state constitution could provide an opportunity to reclaim the time, manner, and place determination of the federal election. And I tell people every day, you don't know what strand of yarn is going to unravel the skein. But that just may be it. Because I'm a woman of faith. And unless you keep trying everything you can, an SCR here, to strike a bill here, to get rid of Eric on another bill, I mean, we are really trying. And you get all the info, the data sets from the elections out into the public domain about all of the rapid clicking of the signature verifications, which of course was not humanly possible to do that quickly. All these data points are coming to light because we keep persevering. And so this is where you come into the drama.
I've got a follow-up question with what you just asked, and it's just because I don't know. Until I received the letter, I was not aware of this little carve-out in our state constitution. It's the U.S. Constitution.
Well, the SCR being in the state constitution.
State constitution as well,
Yes,
right?
sir.
So that being the case, even if the governor has vetoed what our legislature has approved and adopted, how is there not a process to escalate that into the court system?
Well, the SCR didn't require her input for the federal election piece. But the state election piece was a Senate bill that she vetoed.
Yes.
So
I'd like to ask Senator Borrelli as well if
Sure.
he has a strategy for escalating this into the court system.
Well, let's just use Cochise County as the example. They ran out the clock. They prevented the County Board of Supervisors, their elections director, their recorder from doing their job. They sued them. So, I know we're not supposed to gamble here in Arizona, but I bet you $100. If you move to go with a 100% hand count of all your precincts, which basically complies with this resolution, and do a paper ballot, hand count, I bet you're going to get sued. If they want to sue, fine. Bring it on. Because I've got an army behind me that's ready to fight. So, hope that answers your question.
Thank you,
I
Senator.
don't want to go into too much other strategy because I like to let the enemy not see me coming.
Thank you, Senator. Other questions or discussion from the board members?
well, and one other thing.
Senator Rogers.
Senator Borrelli spoke to the three branches of government in a way. Of course, we know it's the executive, the judiciary, and the legislative. Guess which one is the strongest? The legislative. Why? Because we are so many cats that have to be herded. But when we're united, we are the strongest. So we stand with you.
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Gould.
I move that the Mohave County Board of Supervisors instruct our election director to form a plan to implement a hand count of the ballots of the 2024 election.
Heard that. You've heard that motion.
Second.
You've heard that motion and second. Do we have additional discussion?
I have a question, without cost, without anything?
Supervisor Johnson?
I thought I heard Supervisor Angus talk about bringing back some information from the election director. You're talking about today is just to start hand counting all of our elections, is that right, Supervisor Gould?
Supervisor Johnson, no, it was for him to form a plan to do it and bring the plan back to us.
Can you read back the motion to me? It didn't sound that way to me. That's why I was confused.
The motion was to direct the elections director to form a plan to hand count the 2024 election.
Okay, and my question is, Attorney, that's not ordering that to be done, it's just coming back. Is that the way you're reading it or hearing
I
it?
can amend it also.
It'd be best just to clarify.
Let's see.
Track my second.
Supervisor Angus retracts her second to allow you to modify.
And return that plan to the Board of Supervisors for approval.
Thank you.
Second.
You've heard that amended motion and second. Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
Guys appear to have it, do have it, so ordered.